Okay, so we were there Friday and Saturday nights, right? So the first of Cheshvan, whatever you can say that for me. Okay, it's the second month of the year on the Hebrew calendar is Mar Cheshvan. It's that CH Cheshvan, whatever it is the second month of the Hebrew calendar. So the first of Cheshvan, Mar Cheshvan, dawned bright and beautiful and sunny. And okay, it didn't. It was gray and windy. But I'm guessing every day in Kansas is probably gray and windy. So nonetheless, we were in Kansas, and it was the Wildcats' homecoming football game that later that afternoon. We were going to be playing at the coffee house Saturday night, and we had some time. So I brought some e-bikes. So John and Kevin and I went for a ride. And we rode up to the stadium, and it was my intent to ride through, all the tailgate parties and all that stuff, and they wouldn't actually let us do that. And then we rode around Manhattan, Kansas for a little while, and then Kevin had struck up a conversation with, how old did you say that kid was? 12 or 10 or something? The kid who told us where we should go ride the bikes.
Yeah.
So then it became... it's like, oh, let's go there because we didn't really want to ride in town, but, So then we're trying to find this place that the kid told us about, and we finally found it, and we were, riding around and off-roading and stuff, and then Nedra texted me and told me that it was going to start raining, so then we met up with Nedra and loaded the bikes back in the van, and went back to the hotel and got cleaned up and ready for the third installment of the Imperfect Servant's First World Tour. And I'm thinking...
They did so great. Oh, man. I mean, it was, of course they did great. It was awesome.
So I'm thinking so far so good for the first day of Mar Cheshvan. Because if you remember from the book of Ruth, Mara is the word for bitter. And this month of Cheshvan, the second month of the year, is the only month on the Hebrew calendar that has no feasts, no holy convocations, no holy days, nothing. Nothing goes on in that month. Nothing spiritual or scriptural. There's nothing. Which it's the only month of the year on the Jewish calendar that is that way. And this is the second month, so it follows right after the fall feasts, which, Rosh Hashanah, the New Year, began. And then there was Yom Kippur, the holiest day, the Day of Atonement. And then there's Tabernacles, which is the best, the most fun feast of the year when we all camp outside in our tent and it's all of that. And the month previous to that, remember, was 30 days of Elul, and that's typically the time that a Jew would spend those 30 days contemplating their relationship with the Lord, and because they're heading towards the Day of Atonement, and to them, because the Messiah hadn't come yet, that was how they were saved. So these previous 2 months have been heavy with all sorts of stuff, feasts and festivals and holy days and convocations and preparing for stuff and all that, and you get to the month of Cheshvan, Mar Cheshvan, and there's nothing. And it's it's that time of year anywhere, but especially in Israel, where you are getting ready for winter. The days are getting shorter, the nights are getting longer, the temperature has dropped. You've already brought in the last harvest of the year, which happens during Tabernacles, but you haven't yet planted what's going to be the first harvest. And it's that sort of time. And you might think on the surface that would be a good time to relax and refresh, and you don't really have anything you have to do, and there aren't a lot of religious duties and all that stuff. But this month has become, or is known as, a month of bitterness and darkness. And it's just not a fun month if you're Jewish and you're obedient to the instructions and commandments and words of the Lord, that's why it's called Mar Cheshvan. It's bitter. So it's also Saturday night was also the anniversary of the plague. It's always one of the anniversaries of one of the plagues. Yul Brynner and Charlton Heston and all those guys. When they did it, it was like one in a row. It maybe took 10 days. But in reality, it took probably 18 months to go through all of those plagues, and they would send the plagues. Moses would talk to the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh would say yes, and then some days later the Pharaoh would say no, and then the Lord would send some plague, and then there would be all that stuff going on that you saw in the movie. It just took an amount of time, and traditionally, the first of Mar Cheshvan is the plague of pestilence on Egypt. It's called Debir. And sometimes the month of Cheshvan is called Debir because of this pestilence. But this was the plague. Up to that point, all of the plagues had affected both the Jews and the Egyptians, the people of God and the people of the world. This was the first plague where the Lord separated the people of God. And this plague on the cattle, on all the livestock, only fell upon the Egyptians. The livestock that belonged to the Jews, to the Hebrews, the people of God, however you want to phrase that, they were not affected by this plague. And from there on out, the rest of the plagues were only on the people of Egypt, who represents the world, not the people of Egypt. And it was a clear separation from the Lord to show those people that these people are receiving the benefit of knowing me. They're under my protection. My hand is upon them, and it's not upon you. And of course, the concept is the same today as it was then. It's to try to draw people to you, to try to draw people to the people of God who could explain who this God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was. And the reality is many Egyptians came to know the God of Israel. And we know that because by the time you finish the 10 plagues, which would have been probably a year later or some amount of time later, there were a great number of the Egyptians, the people who lived in Egypt, that joined with the people of God when they left Egypt. And they became Jewish in a sense. They threw their lot in with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, much as presumably all of us have. So that starts, that whole idea, that concept of the plague and the separation and the actions of God are what start this month of Mar Cheshvan. On the 11th day of this month, it marks the passing of Rachel, who of course was the mother of the tribes of Israel. And to this day, it's a day of mourning because she was Israel in that sense. It was through her loins and certainly not all of the 12, but she's viewed as the mother of the 12 tribes, the mother of Israel. And if Israel is interpreted to mean under God's authority, then she would, in some sense, be your mother as well. If you follow after the Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, then Rachel is your mother. And to the Middle Eastern languages, and a lot of cultures don't have great-grandmothers and great-great-great-grandmothers, and they have fathers and mothers. And it doesn't matter how far back in the tree that you are, you're called the father and the mother, or the son and the daughter, the brother and the sister. So Rachel is our mother in that sense. And this month marks her passing. 2 weeks from tonight, now you remember next Tuesday is Halloween. So we're not going to have a Bible study. So feel free to show up, but we won't be doing a Bible study. And who knows what the food situation will be. And I'm sure Nedra could play a few tunes for you. But so next Tuesday, no Bible study. Right? We're clear on that?
Mm-hmm.
You're still welcome to come, but no Bible study. So the Tuesday after that is actually the 18th day of the month of Mar Cheshvan. The 17th day of the month, which would be a week from Monday, is an interesting day in the life of scriptures. Anybody know? Okay, there's no reason that you would know, unless you absolutely have the Bible committed to memory. But there was an event that the Bible says happened on the 17th day of the second month, and that event was, it started raining. Ooh, it started raining. Well, it was the first time it had ever started raining. And on Monday, Noah and Shem and Japheth and the other guy, Ham, thank you so much, and their wives boarded the ark on the 17th or the 16th day of the month. And remember, the Lord closed the door and locked them in, just the way the scripture is written. And then it started to rain. So on the Tuesday, which will be the, I don't know what day it is in November, the 7th probably, or near there, 6th or 7th of November, when we have Bible study, that very day, 4,400-ish years previous, would be the first time it had ever rained on planet Earth. And it started raining and didn't stop for 40 days. So when you think of the flood, and the flood was just a judgment, right? We look around the world and we think, oh my gosh, the world is so beautiful, and you can see the Lord's hand in everything, and we're so lucky to live here, and which is all true. But remember that what we see is a result of a judgment. Can you imagine, and we'll know soon, but can you imagine what it was like before? We think it's beautiful now, but it was destroyed and rebuilt in the flood. And I'm guessing previous to that, it was exactly how the Lord had made it and intended it. And that is how it will be, because the earth will be restored. That's the entire purpose of Scripture, is the restoration of all things, it says. It will be restored to the way it was, and it will be fabulous, I'm guessing. I'm guessing no one will go there and say, I'm going back to Manhattan.
The people were very nice.
The people were very nice, and it wasn't a bad place, but man, is it windy. And it is flat.
So flat.
Although I have to say, we were driving, you're driving for 3,000 miles through Kansas, and it's just flat. And there's these giant windmills, and which one of you wags said the state flag of John, of course, it would be John. The state flag of Kansas is one of those Walmart bags blowing on a... Because that's it. Okay, so we're driving all this way, and then all of a sudden you turn off onto some... That's why it's called Junction City, I guess, because it's a junction of two highways. So you turn, and you go left, probably northeast, and all of a sudden there's hills and trees that are all changing colors, and that's weird. So it was actually quite nice. But I don't know how we got there. It won't be like that when we get to the end. It will be better. I'm certain it will be better. No offense to my friends in Kansas. So those are just three of the events that are remembered in this month of Mar Cheshvan. And that's why they think of it as a month of bitterness and a month of darkness, and that there are no feasts and festivals and holy convocations, and there's just nothing. The temperature's dropping, the days are getting short, the harvest is in, there's just nothing. And you look at those three events that they consider during this month that have led to this idea of it being dark and bitter. And if you squint hard enough and boil these things down, and I suppose you could say this about almost anything, there's a similar theme. The Pharaoh had the Pharaoh elected to let the people go, to do what the Lord wanted, to do what the Lord had asked, to do what Moses had asked the Pharaoh to do through the Lord, this plague wouldn't have come upon them. This Deborah, this plague of the cattle. If the Pharaoh had chosen to join himself to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, this plague wouldn't have happened. You think about the death of Rachel, and her offspring were the 12 tribes, and you consider their interaction with their God over several thousand years that are recorded in the Tanakh, and you see it's a checkered relationship. The times when they had become obedient and followed after the Lord and chosen the ways of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, life went well for them. And the times that they didn't make those selections, things went poorly for them. And they would go so poorly for them that they would eventually cry out to this God who they did not know anymore, and this God would respond to them and comfort them and make things better, at least spiritually better, and in most cases probably physically better as well. And then you think of Noah and the flood, and that's pretty clear. Those people lost in the flood, everyone on earth save the 8 on the boat. Those people had made a choice not to follow after the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They had, and I guess the similarity, you could say, it boils down to personal responsibility. And we each have that same responsibility. We each have to make a decision whether we're willing to follow after the Lord or not. And when we make that decision, then the decision comes, how do I implement that? Do I follow his instructions and commandments and words and ideas and pictures? Or do I just say I want to follow him and substitute the things of the world, the things that I want to do? It didn't work well for the Pharaoh. He paid a significant price for doing the things that he wanted to do. But on the other hand, those who joined themselves to the tribe of Israel, to the people of God, and left Egypt, they made a personal decision as well, and it turned out much better for them, presumably. I mean, they all died in the wilderness eventually, but presumably they belonged to the Lord. Same thing with the 12 tribes. The times that they decided to follow and embrace the commandments and instructions and desires of the Lord, things went well for them. And the times that they didn't, things did not go as well. And of course, during the flood, that was a judgment by God because the people chose to do what they wanted to do. And I have no doubt that through all of that, there were people who were saying, oh, but I do, in today's vernacular, I do go to church. I do worship God. But their actions and their heart might indicate something different. And it's impossible for each of us to judge anyone else. It's hard enough for us to judge whether we are following the Lord. But the Lord gave us his instructions. And that is the reason for the Torah. Those are the instructions of what the Lord, those are the instructions of what it would look like if your heart is to follow after the Lord. You will do these things that he has outlined, and the ones I always use. You will help your neighbor when his load falls off his camel. Doesn't matter if he goes to your church or not. You will protect the neighborhood by covering the pit that you've had to dig. You will protect your family by building a parapet around your flat roof. There's just a number of things that the Lord has laid out. And he says that's what it will look like if your heart is for me. You will do those things because you put other people's needs and desires and wants ahead of your own. Your heart is for other people, and in that way, then your heart is for me. And when you don't do that, I wonder if your heart could ever be for the Lord. One of my favorite Brian songs, which you've heard, and I'm sure you like too, is Fear No Evil. And Kevin's probably already heard most of this sermon because we rode together for about 20 hours this weekend. And I always have to run my sermons past somebody. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite songs is Fear No Evil. In Psalm 23, Fear No Evil, that word is Yarah. Fear is Yarah. And it's of course, translated as fear in that verse, and it's accurately translated as fear. That word also means revere or to hold up. So when you read that verse, you can correctly read it as, because we belong to the Lord, we need not fear any evil. That's absolutely true. Or you can read it, because we belong to the Lord, we should not revere or hold up or believe any evil. And those are two completely different things. And you look at the world today, and I think there are so many good people who can't really tell the difference. They don't see clearly some of the things that are evil, and they embrace them. And perhaps it's a lack of understanding of the Scripture, or it's their heart is to try and make everyone happy and comfortable. I don't know. But I do know that there are a number of people, good Christian people, I think, maybe you go to your church or whatever, that do revere things that the Lord considers evil. They stand up for perhaps abortion, or you pick it. There are a number of things the Lord is clear on, and there's a number of Christians that will stand up for those things. And I think that is revering evil. And it's not evil like you're pulling the wings off flies, or with your magnifying glass setting caterpillars on fire or something. But it's the evil. It's evil in the sense that it's not from God. Yirah is also the word. It literally means to throw. It means and to throw. We would call it shoot. To throw an arrow, to shoot an arrow at a target. And the implication is you've hit the target. You've hit the mark. And that's versus kata, which is the word translated as sin, which is the word measure. You're missing the mark. And I'm sure you've all heard that lesson previously. Sin is missing the mark. Well, that's where that comes from, is the Hebrew word is to measure. And what you're measuring is the distance from the bullseye to where your arrow landed. How far did you miss the mark? And the presumption then is, if I know how far I've missed the mark, I can make adjustments and do whatever I need to do to eventually hit the mark. And then that becomes the word yirah. You've hit the mark. You've thrown it. The ancient lexicon of Hebrew says this word is to throw a finger in the direction you should walk. It's this idea of walking correctly. And it's this word Torah is from the root of yirah. So this idea of throwing a finger in the direction you could walk, hitting the mark, not revering evil, all of those things are all sort of wrapped up in this. And you find that's what Torah means, the direction you should walk. And Torah when it was translated into Greek, we've probably covered this before, is this word nomos. And nomos, one of the definitions of nomos is the cross fencing in a field that keeps the animals from getting lost. And in a very real sense, that is the word Torah, because those instructions and commandments and pictures and ideas from the Lord that He gave us are those things. It's the equivalent of the cross fencing in the field that keep us from getting lost. If we can be constrained somewhat by these words and ideas in the Torah, then we will not be lost, because we'll see the direction we should walk. And that's all wrapped up in this word, fear no evil. Which brings us back to Mar Cheshvan. It's a month of bitterness and darkness. And oddly, that's a place inhabited by God. So I have a few verses here, starting in Psalm 18:11. Because when I mentioned this to Kevin on the way, he was a little weak on the God inhabiting the darkness thing. So I thought I would look a few of them up for you. Psalm 18:11, it said, He made darkness His secret place. His pavilion round about Him were dark waters and thick clouds of the skies. Exodus 20:21, all the people stood afar off, and Moses drew near unto the thick darkness where God was. Isaiah 45:3, and I will give thee the treasures of darkness and hidden riches of secret places, that thou may knowest that I, the Lord, which called thee by thy name, am the God of Israel. 1 Kings 8:10-12, and it came to pass when the priests were coming out of the holy place that the clouds filled the house of the Lord, so that the priests could not stand to minister because of the cloud. For the glory of the Lord had filled the house of the Lord. Then spoke Solomon, the Lord said that he would dwell in the thick darkness. 2 Samuel 22:10, and he bowed the heavens and came down, and darkness was under his feet. And he rode upon a cherub and did fly, and he was seen upon the wings of wind, and he made darkness pavilions around him, dark waters and thick clouds of the sky. And Deuteronomy 5:22, these words the Lord spoke unto all the assembly of the mount out of the midst of the fire, out of the cloud, and out of the thick darkness. With a great voice he added no more. And he wrote them on 2 tables of stone, and they delivered them unto me. So we could, there are more verses like that. But this idea that God inhabits the darkness is an actual biblical idea. And it's true. And if you go on to read the verses above and below all of those, you will find that in most of these cases, the idea that God inhabits the darkness is because you will find yourself in the darkness now and again. And he's there. He's always there for you. He's there wherever you are. And it's not that he lives in the darkness and pops out now and again. It's that his children find themselves in the darkness, and he will be there no matter what. So this month of Mar Cheshvan, darkness and bitterness, is a place of the Lord, because he inhabits those places, because we inhabit those places. And from the beginning of the book, and we may get to some of this on the 17th, or whenever that is, the 7th, which would be the 17th of March, the 7th. From the beginning of the book, and all through the book, we are variously described as the seed of Abraham, there's various seeds. We're described as trees. We're occasionally described as plants. But we've talked before about the seed. And we talked about it just the other night, I think. The seed, the teeny tiny little seed of whatever it is, has everything that it needs to live and survive and grow and thrive already in the seed. All it's waiting for is the right conditions. It needs water, it needs light, it needs carbon dioxide, it needs the things that a plant needs, it needs food. So this seed will stay in a seed form for millennium. Like I said, some of the seeds that they found buried with the pharaohs, they brought out of the tombs, planted them, and they grew. They will wait until the conditions are right. So our bedroom's right there, as most of you know. And out our brand new bay window, thanks Kevin, there is our garden. And I enjoy watching the garden, and I especially enjoy watching Nedra's 12-foot tall sunflowers. And they have these sunflower heads. We saw sunflowers in Kansas, whole fields of them. They're like this high. What's up with that? So anyway, these sunflowers are immense. But all sunflowers do the same thing. They wake up in the morning and they're looking east. They're looking at the sun. And throughout the day, their little heads turn and they follow the sun. Until in the evening, they're looking west. And the sun goes down. And of course, it becomes dark.
Amazing.
That is amazing.
Absolutely
So
incredible.
do they reset at
And then
night?
by the time you get up in the morning, they're all looking east again.
So they reset.
They do every day. Every day.
Next year we should set up a time lapse.
We should. That's a great idea.
And see what they do at night.
Yeah, I think they play cards or something. I don't know.
No,
But
that little guy comes out and turns them.
maybe, I don't know how it happens. But it's the weirdest thing. And if you have a garden or, you've watched plants, I don't know, I just love having a garden out there. And I'm not a farmer, okay? I admit it, not a farmer. But I would swear that you get up in the morning and the plants are bigger. The flowers are bigger. The fruits, it's like, they weren't that big when I went to bed. Now we know that's true with dandelions. All weeds are true like that. But the garden, I mean, how is that? Okay.
And when they start to sprout, if you do a happy dance, they respond to that.
Okay. Well, I have not tried that. Ours grow pretty well without the happy dance. But maybe, I don't know.
Works for
But
my
my point here is, the seed will grow when it gets all of the things that it needs: light, water, carbon dioxide, food, whatever it is that it needs. So I did some very little research and discovered an amazing thing about most plants. Is during the day, the sun is out, they absorb the radiation or whatever it is they absorb from the sun, and the sun comes in and changes, the sugars, chlorophyll or whatever it is, in the plants to allow them to grow. But what it really allows them to do is to get ready to grow. As soon as the sun goes down, the plant then takes its energies from harvesting the sun, drawing nutrients out of the food, making the conversions or whatever. It's at night that the plant grows. So this whole concept of getting up in the morning, and it's like, I wasn't there that last night. The sunflower things you can see because they actually move. But most plants grow in the dark. They need light because the light is what changes all the stuff into the other stuff that they need to grow. But they don't actually grow much during the day. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And it's this perfect picture. This is a really long way around the barn to get to this perfect picture of Mar Cheshvan. It's this month of darkness and bitterness. It's this place where God dwells. But it's that time when we grow. And think that through. They say there was only 100 Christians in China in 1949, and the communists came in and outlawed all religion. And now there's 150 million Christians in China. And we know of countries all over the world where persecution has been brutal. And yet it's in those places under that persecution that the church grows and grows stronger. And it's the same idea of darkness and bitterness. It's that time where none of us want to be there, but God is there. And it's that time that we often grow the most.
You could say the opposite too for this country. That other countries have grown, and this country's gotten more lax through our
That's true.
abundance.
That's
Which
true.
is really sad.
It is sad. And maybe that's part and parcel of personal growth and church growth and national growth, is that there has to be a time of darkness. And that's exactly what we see in the Tanakh. You would see for hundreds of years the people walking away from the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob until it became so bad and so unbearable that they cried out for his help, and then it would swing back the other way. And they would be standing tall for the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They would be doing all of the things that the Tanakh asked them to do, and everything would be good, and then it would swing back the other way. And it would seem that growth, even as you read your Old Testament, happens in the darkness. We know that with countries like China. And I would suggest that if you're honest with yourself, you know that personally as well. Those times, right now, Nedra and I are going through some, stuff. And it is a time of not awesomeness. Mom's in hospice and Megan's having surgery, and we have grandkids over here all the time. And there's so much stuff going on. It's just overwhelming sometimes. And it just keeps added and added and added. And there's more stuff and there's more stuff and there's more stuff. And you just think, why? Why are we even bothering? Why don't we just give all this up? I mean, there's an easier way, and there is an easier way. But that's when you grow. And that's the reality of this month. And that's the reality of your lives. And that's the reality of our lives. Is the strongest, most lasting growth is going to take place in the darkness. Now, there is an interesting Jewish tradition that is not biblical in any way, shape, or form. I just want to make that clear. This is not a Bible verse. It's a Jewish tradition. And those of you who have been here for a while know that I tend to like to see what the people who actually wrote the Bible and the culture of the time thought of the words. I recognize it's man's opinion, and it's worth what any man's opinion is worth. But this Jewish tradition is that the third temple, and this, I could go through this whole thing, it's really long and involved, and it's just whacked out to the max. You know, they didn't want to hurt this month's feelings, and so they did that, and all that. And I'm not, if you happen to know where this is, you know, I'm not supporting any of that. I'm just saying the tradition is that the third temple, the final temple, you know, the temple that the Lord will return to, is dedicated in the month of Mar Cheshvan, this month of darkness and bitterness. And the idea is out of the darkness and bitterness comes this great light. And that's exactly what I think the Bible will teach you. I think that's exactly what history will teach you. That's what your garden teaches you. And I think personally that's what you know to be true. And as you go through stuff, and stuff happens, stuff will always happen, and it will be continual.
What month is it in our calendar?
Right now.
In October?
Well, it's October, November.
October, November.
Saturday night, which was, what was the date? The 20th or something?
Today's 24th.
Okay, Saturday was the 21st. That was the first day of Mar Cheshvan. So 30 days from that will be into the next month. So right now we are 4 or 5 days into this month of darkness and bitterness. But all this stuff is just a picture. You know, it doesn't mean that bad things are only going to happen in that month. Of course, bad things happen, you know, regularly to all people. But what it's saying is it's okay. It's not fun, but it's okay. Because out of that is growth. Out of the darkness comes the light. And it's awesome. And that should strengthen your faith in the Lord. And doing that enough times does strengthen your faith in the Lord. Just like every year the plants go through that. They grow at night. I didn't know that. I mean, I've awoken, I can't tell you how many times over the last 60 years, and looked at it and thought, well, that's bigger than it was when I went to bed. But I've never put two and two together. But it's true, it really is. Growth happens, life happens. And the great light, I think, will come out of the darkness. And whether that's in this month, I mean, not necessarily this month, this year, but maybe it'll happen this month. Maybe it'll happen this month, years hence. Maybe, you know, I don't know. I would not be a bit surprised to find that the third and final tabernacle, the place where Jesus will return, is dedicated during this month. So, anyway, that's all I have for you.